Hello. Oh my god, why is this so fucking loud? Did this get louder? Oh, because I have my headphones up. Okay. Hello, welcome to another episode of Esoterica and Nonsense, a podcast where we discuss myths, legends, folktales, fairy tales, supernatural phenomenon, and religions from around the world. I am your host, Annabelle, Pepperpot Pie resident and artist in residence. I'm sitting here on a beautiful Sunday. I'm feeling so good. I'm feeling so hyped. I'm feeling high off of life right now. I hope that you are too. But let us remember and be reminded that there are so many people on planet Earth who are not safe, who are not doing okay, who are being exploited, who are being murdered. And my dream for 2024 and my dream for the future is to live in a world where all humans are seen as valuable and seen as worth deserving peace, food, healthcare, education. My dream is that regardless of appearance, nationality, religion, whatever the fuck, that we can start seeing each other as a extended family and take care of each other. There's literally plenty of resources for us to all have enough food, have a safe, healthy place to live, and have clean water. There's literally no excuse, especially with the technology that we have. Come on, you guys, let's step it up. Let's step it up. If you see something that isn't right, say something. If you have the ability to help someone, even if it's just making them a meal, even if it's just saying, I love you, let's just try our best, okay? And I'm just sick of this cycle of oppression and violence because the effects are devastating. We are living in thousands of years of this cycle. It's incredibly hard to change, but if we all try our best to change the momentum of that cycle, it does make a difference. We all make a difference. So, that's a perfect segue into Mermaids. This episode is going to be a part 1 of Mermaids / Mermen / Merfolk. There are so many interesting, cool stories about mer people, and I want to fucking talk about it. I feel like any kind of humanoid creature is so fascinating because I just humanoids fascinate me, and I think they fascinate most humans because it's like a straddle between the human world, which we associate being so separate from the animal kingdom, mixed with an animal body part, which is almost like this holy union of the erectus human brain, right? The straight spine, but still with that earthly connection. And it's almost always the human torso and then the bottom half being animalistic. Anyway, I just think about it especially as a totemic symbol, but also as a possible reality, because I mentioned this in the Alien episode, but the Anunnaki, who are allegedly the creators of the human race, who tinkered with earth blood and spliced in their extraterrestrial blood, created the human race, and allegedly also created all kinds of other humanoid forms, such as centaurs, such as fauns, possibly mermaids. We're gonna get into that. Okay, so anyway, that's just me already just kind of thinking. My mind is going a million miles a minute thinking about mermaids. Okay, so fun fact. Before The Little Mermaid was made into a film, obviously it was also a story by Hans Christian Andersen, European. But before the movie was made, which is not really that accurate to the story, but doesn't really matter, mermaids were actually almost always considered to be bad omens or bad luck. Not all of the time, but a lot of the time. And specifically, seeing a mermaid or merfolk was associated with floods, storms, shipwrecks, drownings, and abductions. However, some stories do feature mermaids as gift givers, givers of boons. I feel like no one uses the word boon anymore in the modern lexicon, but it's like used a lot in folk tales. But like a boon is like a wish kind of. Also, mermaids are notorious for falling in love with mortal humans. And that's actually kind of like teeters the line of bad luck too, because there is like a huge theme with mermaids who will like intoxicate men to fall in love with them. And so like half of the stories will be like these men move into the water and live happily with these women, but the other half of the stories say that the men were brutally drowned by this mermaid who hates men. And like I feel like both could equally be true. Like I could totally see a mermaid being like, fuck men, I'm gonna kill this guy. Or that a mermaid would fall in love with a man and all of his bros on land were like, whatever, fuck this guy, like his fish girlfriend's really hot and like whatever. And like, anyway, who's to say? But knowing the earthly mortal man, I wouldn't be surprised if some rumors had been spread out of jealousy. This is all speculation, of course. Okay, so stories of mer people appear all over European folklore, Asiatic folklore, and African folklore. And we're talking like all fucking over, And like, of course, I think like a really common example that we think of when we think of mermaids are like the Greek siren. I think mostly because in English speaking regions, sorry, can you hear that dog barking? There's a neighbor who we share, like our backyards share walls, and they have these two tiny dogs that go on barking sprees. And I would say I'm annoyed, but they have sausage bodies and I think they're very cute. What was I ranting about? Yes, I was ranting about that in English-speaking countries, they kind of dick ride like Rome and Greece. And like, granted, it makes sense because a lot of like westernized European derivative culture is the child of ancient Rome, which is the child of ancient Greece. And our language and culture like all comes from them, blah, blah, blah. But it is, yeah. So we all know that, but of course, I think what was so prolific specifically about Greece was that they had philosophers and historians travel the world and take in-depth account of other cultures. So, maybe we should take a fucking example out of their book, because conquest wasn't their crowning jewel. Information and learning, debate, philosophy was their crowning jewel. Just saying. Okay. Am I the worst? Okay, so I was talking about Greek sirens. Okay, so I think Greek sirens are often cited in the Western thought when we think of mermaids, but interestingly, almost all of the ancient accounts of Greek sirens, they were described as part bird, which is kind of weird. Like, it's kind of an outlier in the mermaid catalog. But of course, they were famous for singing hypnotizing songs and luring men to their death. So this is like a classic staple of the mermaid MO. Also, another fun fact is that allegedly Christopher Columbus saw mermaids on his journey to the Caribbean. And nowadays, historians believe that he most likely saw a manatee or a seal or some other sea mammal. However, okay, not to get crazy on your asses, but this is why I started a fucking podcast. So I have heard stories, like I grew up reading mermaid stories. I think the first book I ever checked out of my elementary school library. Shout out to Flores Dolores, who was our librarian. God bless her. Or Dolores Flores. That was backward. It's because I knew her as Miss Flores, so Flores came to my mind first. Okay, sorry. Mrs. Flores was the librarian. She referred me to a mermaid book because I wanted to read about mermaids, and as I was reading it, like all of these stories from around the world were too similar. You know what I mean? And I was convinced as a kid they were real. And we don't even know shit about the ocean. Like, truly, we know barely but a fraction of the ocean. And knowing humans and how much they love mass murder, who's to say that mermaids once existed and then we eradicated them? And then, 100, 200 years go by, and then you read a story about a mermaid and you're like, oh, this must be a fancy pants fairy tale. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a really big topic. And what's the word I'm really looking for? A really big theme, I think, in human culture. This is my opinion, but I think that it's totally plausible that some of these creatures and fantastical beasts, or whatever you want to call them, existed. And it is so plausible that humans killed them all and then pretended that they were made up, Okay, anyway. So, on Reddit, I actually don't use Reddit that much, but I follow this one subreddit called Humanoids. I think it's called Humanoids, something like that. You can find it. But it's like it's a subreddit where people post like all kinds of crazy shit about like aliens or like humanoids, like all kinds of weird things, yetis. Okay, so this one chick made a crazy ass post. She was in the Swedish military, specifically the Navy, and they were stationed on a small island off of Spain. Like, we're talking really small, like not even like Majorca or Menorca, like some island we haven't heard of, which checks out because almost all like major military powers have bases somewhere in the islands off of Spain because of their advantageous view of the Mediterranean. Okay, so in her post, she explained that she worked with a crew that manned like a small-ish submarine, and they were mostly doing deep sea exploration. Like, it wasn't fully scientific, but I think they were like just, I don't know. I mean, I think it's like kind of classified, but I think that they were just kind of like roaming around the Western Mediterranean looking for God knows what. Okay, so she was saying that in their like submarine probe, they had a camera, but it was because it had to like withstand all this pressure, and because of their budgeting, this camera was really like low tech. Like, it's mostly like black and white and like kind of fuzzy. So imagine like back in the day having those old TVs with the poor connection. So we're talking like kind of like staticky imagery, black and white. You Gen Zers have no idea what I'm talking about. And she said that one day their submarine came across a mer person, and that like their body was metallic, like their tail, but also their skin was shining, and it was like pulsating with electricity. Like, it almost looked like their body had this like this pulse of light, and they were holding kind of like tridents. And she explained that they immediately recognized the camera on their probe, and they all like examined it. If I'm not mistaken, they had sent a probe out. So like so this probe had a camera, and it wasn't like directly next to the submarine. And multiple mer people like swam up to this camera and were expecting it, and everyone's like, what the fuck? And like I said, like their bodies are like pulsing with this like electricity. And after inspecting the camera, they seemed not to care, and they just kept going around their business. And She claims that with their probe, they followed these mer people like to their city, and they had a full-on underwater city. And she explained that they had seemed to like propel themselves through water, like with some kind of technology, because when we think of mermaids, we think of them swimming, right? Like a fish, or like almost like a dolphin swims. But she was saying that they were just propelling themselves through water without swimming, just like gliding through water. And she basically in her story said that they reported this back to the Swedish government, and they asked them to like cease and desist. They asked them to not report, to not to go to that part of the ocean, and to not say anything to anyone. And she was like, what? Like, what? Seriously? Like, the implications of this are huge, obviously. Like, this is in the Mediterranean, and like, if there's a whole civilization, like, she was like, what? And that's literally all those are the only orders from the military. Don't do any more research. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell us anything. So that's why she posted it on Reddit. She's like, I just feel like I have to share this, and I feel like no one's going to believe me, so why not just throw it on a subreddit where everyone kind of seems to be on board. I highly recommend looking up this subreddit. It's pretty wild. I mean, and for me, this is super believable, but that's just me, you guys. So, let's get into some stories. Let's talk about mer folk, mer people, the people of ocean. Okay, so I wanted to talk about Atargatis. Atargatis is considered to be one of the oldest known mer goddesses in human history, which is why she's an honorable mention, and we're going to talk to her. She's considered a Syrian mer goddess, but technically throughout like ancient history, she was worshipped all around the Eastern Mediterranean throughout different parts of history. So she was considered a chief goddess of what is now modern-day northern Syria in the classical antiquity period, which was between the 8th and 5th century BCE. She was considered a fertility goddess, a goddess of love, as well as the protector of her city, which was known as Hierapolis, which is now modern-day Manbij. So I do want to mention that in a lot of the sources I found, they referred to the city as Hierapolis because eventually the Greeks considered this to be the patron city of Hera. And the Greeks claim that Atargatis was Hera, but she's not. And I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay. So really big symbols associated with Atargatis are doves and fish, because doves are the classic symbol of love, and fish are a symbol of fertility, as they are from the sea, the mother of all things. And there's an ancient statue of her in a mer goddess form at the temple Ashkelon, which is in a very ancient city, which is now in modern day Palestine, aka what we now call Israel. It is directly north of Gaza. Okay, so because she was the goddess of fertility and ancestral generations, she was often depicted around phallic symbology. So like penis symbology was often around her, because she's like this emblem of generational inheritance, if that makes sense. Fun fact, there was a period in the 3rd century BC where some men would actually castrate themselves out of respect for her. Eventually, a king of the region decided that this was like fucking balls to the wall insane. So he made a law where if you were caught castrating yourself, that one of your hands would be cut off, because he decided this was like a non-appropriate way to worship the goddess. I mean, who's to say? I kind of love this. So like I mentioned, like it is believed that this is one of the oldest mermaids known to human history. And some of our best kept records of her actually come from the Greek philosophers and travelers who traveled around the world and wrote these stories down. So like I said, and that is with a lot of modern history. A lot of our best histories come from Greek philosophers and travelers. Okay, so the story goes that Atargatis drowned herself in a nearby lake by the temple of Ashkelon. So she drowned herself in a nearby lake, which then turned herself into like a human fish hybrid. And that is like why the statue of her at the temple of Ashkelon is there. And so Greeks would refer to her as Derketo. And again, like I mentioned, finally when Greeks started occupying that area, they started just calling her Hera, and all the temples that were once for Atargatis became temples of Hera. So Atargatis wasn't always depicted in mermaid form, but she sometimes was human, sometimes was a mermaid, or sometimes was like a mermaid with feet sticking out. Like, it was pretty weird, but she often had 2 lions by each of her side, and she was often holding a scepter in one hand and a spindle in the other, and she sometimes would have a ray of light shining off of her head, as well as a crown with a gemstone known as lichnis, which in Greek means shining. And so this is like allegedly like a mystical stone, which is known to glow by night. And also is actually a beautiful flower. It kind of grows in like shrub bushes, and they have these like light green, almost fuzzy stalks, and these hot pink little flowers. They're so beautiful. So I do want to talk about this mystical glowing stone. And so I looked it up, and nowadays when you type up lichnis, I'm saying this so ugly, but it's Lychnis. They now associate this with the quality of stones being able to glow when they're shown with either UV light or X-rays. And so like that's the quality that they refer to. However, I do know of stones that are known to be luminous. And I think I mentioned this on a previous episode, but it's worth mentioning again. When I was in high school, I met this nut job on the street. We actually got along at first, but he started kind of creeping me out. But basically, I was like 17. I was in downtown Berkeley. I was walking to the bus stop, and this older man comes up to me. I don't even want to say older man. I found out that he was 65, but he probably looked 40. I mean, he looked amazing. He came up to me, and he said, "Oh, I know you. We met last week." And I said, "No." And he said, "Yeah, oh, we met at this convention, like the San Jose whatever convention." And I was like, "No, I wasn't there. I was in fucking high school. I mean, granted, I skipped school a lot. I wasn't going to fucking San Jose. I went to San Jose twice in my life." Okay, so this guy is like, no, I know you. And we ended up walking to the same bus stop, and he basically started telling me like his story, and he was telling me that he had been abducted by aliens in his 20s, and then in his that he was born in the year of the dragon. And when he was, I think, 30, because it's 12-year cycles, right? So I think he was 36, give or take. And he went to China. So he was born in the year of the dragon. And he said that he went to China, and he went to the temple of the dragon in the year of the dragon, which was in the province of the dragon. And outside the temple, he found this giant orb stone. It was a stone in the shape of an orb, and it was a green stone that was glowing. And he took it, and he said that this stone, he found out, was worth like millions of dollars, and that this stone is a very rare kind of jade known as glowing jade, but that through the ancient world it was so coveted that now people don't even know about it because it was like overused, and now it was either maybe destroyed or buried with emperors because now it doesn't really seem to be talked about or known. And he was telling me that finding this orb changed his life, and he now like sells this stone, and he was wearing one around his neck. He wasn't kidding. I mean, it was daylight, so it didn't necessarily look like jade, but he took it off his neck and he made a cup out of his hands, and he had me look at it in the dark of his hands, and this shit was glowing, like it was glowing in the dark. And he was saying that it gets charged by sunlight and it glows at night. And literally on Atargatis' crown, it was said that her crown had stones that glowed by night. Okay, just wanted to throw that out there. I feel like that's an applicable fun fact from Annabelle's life. Okay, so another variation of this tale, because I mentioned that Atargatis became a mermaid by drowning herself, and so like another common version of this, which is a little bit more specific, is that Atargatis had fallen in love with a youth known as Ichthys, which means fish. And they had a daughter together, and she became very ashamed of their love and decided to drown herself. And then she became half fish. So like maybe I'm just speculating, but maybe like she was with a fish guy, and as she drowned herself, he like came to save her and granted her the ability to live underwater with him. Like, who knows? But the daughter they had together was raised in the desert by doves and grew up to be the famous and legendary Assyrian queen Semiramis. Just saying, that's also a really hot name, Semiramis. Oh, fuck yes. So it is thought that Atargatis is actually the combination of three more ancient goddesses, one being Asherah, one being Anat, and one being Atar. So Asherah is the goddess of the ancient Semitic cultures. Now, I just want to be clear that the word Semite technically refers to a much broader group of people than what we use it for in the modern day. The word Semite used to refer to the people of the Eastern Mediterranean, including parts of Northeast Africa. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because ancient Semitic cultures does not necessarily mean ancient Jewish culture. This is like a lot older than Judaism itself. Okay. So Asherah has been associated in modern times with Eve from the Bible, as she is considered to be the mother as she is considered to be the mother of all of the living. And Asherah is now kind of been like, her name has kind of been forgotten, but it is believed that like her legacy now is combined with a lot of modern deities. And I think Asherah is like the most beautiful name. Okay, so the other goddess I mentioned was Anat, who was an ancient war goddess from the upper ancient Mesopotamian cultures, and she was a principal goddess. She was considered to be the ally of the weather god Baal, who also, this is a fun fact, like now Baal is considered to be one of the princes of hell. But before Judaism and before like this monotheistic craze came about, he was a principal god. He was an OG god. And so I'll talk about this on a later episode, but as monotheism was introduced, it became common for people to, and specifically the Hebrews and the Christians, to like laugh at people who worship these more ancient cultures, or like what we would consider pagan, I guess what Christianity would call pagan. And from what I remember, I think Baal just so happens to rhyme with a Hebrew word for like shit or flies. So that's why Baal is often known as the Lord of the Flies. And so it all actually, it's like a wordplay situation. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So Baal was a weather god, and there are multiple stories of Anat helping him throughout different trials and tribulations as he was trying to establish himself as a god on earth. And now this, I mean, obviously the ancient Mesopotamian cultures are referring to the Anunnaki, but specifically him being a weather god is like really like smelling like Anu, or possibly Ea / Enlil. And Anat I'm pretty sure was most likely sister of Anu because of their similar names, meaning that they were a brother and sister, and one of his concubines. Anu was the principal god of the Anunnaki. Anunnaki means from those who came from Anu, so it's Anu and his descendants. Some would call them the gods of the ancient Mesopotamian culture. Others would consider them colonizing aliens from far, far away. Others would say that both are equally true. I just wanted to throw this out there, but because Anat is considered one of the oldest goddesses known to human history, so many names for women have Anna in it, Anna, right? My name is Annabelle, Annabelle, but there are so many names: Diana, Diana, Ana Lucia. There's so many Anna names, and this arguably all traces back to one of the oldest recorded principal goddesses, Anat. So that's pretty hot. Technically, I'm named after a war goddess. And the Hebrew word Anna comes from a root of a Hebrew word meaning grace of God. And Anu also used to mean God. So grace of, just saying, if she was the concubine of Anu, the grace of God could also just mean the grace of Anu, the guy who's, Anyway, am I freaking you out, or are you picking up what I'm putting down? Please write in at esotericaandnonsense@gmail.com. So as time went on, actually the goddess Anat was introduced to Egyptian culture and became a prominent goddess during the reign of Ramses II, who personally revered and worshipped her. And at this point, Egypt had a pretty big reign, and they reigned over Palestine, which is now considered Israel, and she remained part of the Egyptian pantheon into the Roman occupation, bitch. Anat is that girl. And then we have Atar or Atart. She was a North Semitic equivalent to Ishtar or Isis. She is the goddess of hunting, love, sexuality, beauty, war. She was worshipped by the Canaanites and the Phoenicians, and she was symbolized by the lion and by a chariot being pulled by horses, and sometimes even doves as well. And she is associated with the evening star. So it is thought that Atargatis is an amalgamation of these three goddesses. And that was just an honorable mention. I know the rest I'm going to tell you are really truly folk tales, but I just thought that was really important to dive into, that our oldest known recorded mermaid is from the Mesopotamian and Semitic cultures. So the oldest merman is from the same cultures, and he was known as Kululu, and he is considered to be a sea monster who is owned by the god Ea/Enlil, son of Anu, and he allegedly gave Kululu, this beast, to his son Marduk. I have heard theories that Kululu could be the Leviathan that is mentioned in the Bible, and that the Kululu was in fact maybe a giant serpent, because it's pretty vague. But the female versions of the Kululu were known as the Kuliltu, but most of the depictions of Kululu had arms and a human face, but the rest of the body would be a fish or a serpent. So this really does make me think of Enki. So the Anunnaki pantheon is large, but on planet Earth, the story goes that the Anunnaki are a colonizing alien race who colonized different planets around our universe, and Earth was a very small planet in their eyes, and as they are miners for precious gems, but specifically gold, Earth was not seen as a huge cash cow for them. And so Anu, who is their principal patriarch, gave Earth as a gift to his first sons, Enki and Enlil. Enlil is his legitimate son, and Enki is his bastard son. He gave Earth to them as like a little vacation planet, as a little testing planet, and it is said that all of the ancient pantheons from different cultures are based off of Enlil and Enki and their descendants. And so, as the story goes, Enlil, or Ea, so Earth, for example, is named after Ea, E-A. And Ea, or Enlil, was considered to be like the god of weather, because he was by weather he would use bombs. He would bomb humans to control them. He was a war god. He was interested in conquest. He was interested in control and using humans as kind of like a slave race. Whereas Enki, the bastard son, was a master scientist. He spent a lot of his time splicing genetics and was employed by his brother Enlil to create a perfect slave race known as humans. So Enki was tinkering around. I could talk about this forever, but really like this idea of humanoid forms of like part human, part animal does kind of make me think of Enki, especially because Enki is often depicted as a merman, and the sign of Capricorn refers to Enki. That whole like goat mermaid thing is a symbol of Enki. So that's kind of like what all this shit makes me think of. But again, like this is me and my mind like reeling on its own journey. And who's to say I wasn't there? So now I want to move on. I want to talk about like fun little folk tales, because there are so many cool and beautiful, creepy, weird stories about mer people, and I just love them. So first I want to talk about Japan. In Japan, they have mer people in their folklore, and they're known as Ningyo. N-I-N-G-Y-O, Ningyo. Which literally translates into human fish. And actually, fun fact about the Japanese language. I heard this, and I'm pretty sure it's true, but in Japanese language, like gender isn't actually indicated. So like, for example, in English, we use like, oh, that's her purse, that's his purse, that's their purse. Like everything in Japan is used in the third person, or like their. So basically like gender is not indicated in their sentence structure. And I also thought that it was cool that there's just one word for like the mer people, which is human fish. I love that. Okay. So there's multiple sources from Japanese history that people in fact captured Ningyo in the 7th century and possibly before. And these accounts describe them as freshwater creatures with childlike appearances. It's really creepy. And there's also some stories of them like being beached at the edges of lakes. And it's a legendary in Japan that if you eat the flesh of a Ningyo, that you would have heightened abilities or possibly live forever. And there's a famous folktale known as Yao Bikuni, which is the story of a girl from Obama, which I didn't realize was an area in the Wakasa province. And so the story goes that her father was a rich man named Takahashi, who was a descendant of the founder of the Wakasa province. And so when she was 16 years old, she unknowingly ate the flesh of a Ningyo. In fact, the Dragon King himself had appeared to her in a disguise with a white beard, very wizardly of him, and he gave her this meat as a gift. And Another version is that her dad was actually a fisherman and he caught one, and before he threw it back, she took a bite out of it out of curiosity. But either way, she takes a bite out of this flesh, and as she becomes older, she decides to become a nun. She becomes a priestess of Buddhism, and she resides in the Queen Ji Temple nearby on the mountain in a grass hut. And it says that she lived for over 800 years. And what Yao Bikuni actually means is the 800-year-old Buddhist priestess. It's the 800 priestess, basically. And so she spent 800 years traveling throughout Japan, and eventually she decides to end her life as she wants to rest. So she returns to her homeland. Some stories say that she sealed herself in a cave. Other versions say that she buried herself alive, and she requested a camellia tree to be planted on the site as an indication of whether she remains alive. So I think the idea is that if the camellia tree continued to bloom, that she would still be alive under there. Oh, what? I love this story. And funnily enough, this actually relates to a separate Japanese folktale known as Shira Bikuni, which means white nun or white priestess. And this woman was an old Buddhist priestess who was written about in 1449. And it was said that she was over 800 years old and had been born in the mid 7th century. Spooky. Oh, dude, so cool. So another notable story of Japanese folklore, what's going on, is of Prince Shotoku. So it is said that Prince Shotoku was presented with a Ningyo to eat, and he immediately discarded it because he saw them as unlucky, and he thought it would bring disaster. He personally knew that fishermen of the area would usually throw them back into the water after they caught them, so he immediately refused to eat the fish. And I guess as a way to not have bad luck, he decided to build a temple in honor of the spirit so that he wouldn't have to suffer from a poor fate. And another version of the story is that Prince Shotoku went swimming in a pool near Lake Biwa and actually met a living Ningyo and spoke to it. It was said the Ningyo told him that it had been born into this hybrid form after committing poor deeds in its past life. So in this version, he too builds a temple and dedicates it to the mercy goddess in hopes that it will salvate the soul of the Ningyo. So another story that I thought was just really fucking hilarious was it doesn't have a proper name, but the story is it just feels like three dads that told this story, and this is why this is believable to me. This is the most believable story. So the story goes that in the around 1140, give or take, that three fishermen caught 3 Ningyos, and this was in the Ise province. The Ise province. So they described these Ningyos as giant fish with human-like heads, fine, sharp teeth like a fish, and a protruding mouth like a monkey. They said that they hauled them onto land. They were so big that their tails were dragging, and that these creatures were screaming like humans and were shedding tears like humans. What the fuck? That's so jarring. You have this giant fish with a human face and it's screaming and crying. What the fuck? So these fishermen obviously are oh, these must be Ningyos, and they're great. So they decide to eat them, and so they gut them, they cook them, they eat them, and they say that they were exquisitely delicious and that they suffered no side effects. What? I just love that they like knew about the Ningyo and like knew the folk tales, but were like, cool, like let's eat them. And they were like, yeah, nothing happened. They tasted really good. I love that. So, like I mentioned, throughout Japanese history, there have been multiple sightings, even into more of the modern era. Fishermen were said to have caught them and throw them back into the water, or people on sailing and boat expeditions were claimed to have seen them. So there was actually a report from a samurai who said that he saw one in the mid-18th century. He was traveling by sea to Edo, and in the Genkai Sea, he saw a woman surface 20 meters ahead of his boat, and she had a pale bluish hue and light red long hair. She smiled at him and then dove down into the water. And at this point, he could see her tail surface, and he realized that she was a Ningyo. Oh, that's so hot. I want more movies about this type of stuff. This is what I want. I want movies about mermaids, please. The Little Mermaid's not even that good of a story, just saying. But I will say there's elements of Ursula that are really fascinating, and we'll talk about that at another time. But the idea of like selling a piece of your soul for a power is like a real thing, and I think that's actually the most believable and interesting aspect of The Little Mermaid. Okay, so next up, I want to talk about Iara. Iara is from Brazil. And Iara means water lady or lady of the lake, or really, I guess, to be more specific, lady of the river. So she is known to live in the Amazona, as they say, which is so much hotter. Amazona. We should say that instead. Okay, so Iara is known to be a beautiful and young woman, and she's described with having green hair sometimes and light brown copper-like skin, brown eyes, and a tail similar to a freshwater dolphin, but sometimes she's described with having a fish tail or sometimes even a manatee tail. So it is said that she sits on a rock by the river combing her hair or dozing under the sun. But if she sees a man, she will begin to sing and lure him in with her beauty. Once he's under her spell, the man would leave everything behind and live with her underwater. Other stories, of course, claim that she lures them in to drown them. So I actually found a really interesting origin story of Iara. And this story goes that Iara was a beautiful woman indigenous to the Amazona, and she grew up in a patriarchal tribe. She became a very talented warrior and was adored by her tribe, but specifically by her father, who was the chief. Of course, as the story goes, her brothers grew very envious and very resentful of her, as it was a patriarchal culture, and they decided to murder her in the night. So they abduct her from her sleep. But Iara is a fucking bad bitch, and she's a warrior, so she defends herself and accidentally kills them because she didn't realize how weak they were. My queen. So, killing your siblings is like a huge no-no, a huge shame. So she hides from her village. She hides in the forest so that her father won't find her. But eventually they discover her and they punish her for her crimes. So she is drowned in the river on the night of the full moon. Ah, this is so good. Like, this could be a movie. I'm like, who the fuck is in charge of making movies? Because they're dropping the fucking ball. Like, these stories are so fucking boring and contrived. Like, there's literally endless amounts of folk tales. You don't even need to change anything. Just make them into movies. Okay, so anyway, Iara is punished for her crimes. She's drowned in the river on the night of the full moon. And the fish in the river swim and come to her rescue. and they grant her the ability to breathe underwater. They give her a fish tail, and she spends the rest of her life taking revenge on men by seducing them and drowning them in the river. It is said that those who survive her attacks have bite marks on their neck and eventually end up losing their minds. But of course, other stories claim that she's not murdering and drowning men, and that she's actually looking for a lover, and that she lives in a state of heartbreak because she is immortal, and so every lover that she finds only lives for so long, and so she suffers from loneliness. Oh, my poor baby. We love Iara. That's also a beautiful name. Have you noticed that mermaids only have hot names? Because I've noticed that. Okay, next up we have, this is such a good story. Oh my god. So this is a story from A Tale of the 1001 Nights. I'm telling you, Tales of the 1001 Nights is so fucking good. The cool thing too is that you could buy one version, like that's published, but it will only have some of the stories. You could buy another copy from like a different translation, and they'll just be different stories. Like, it's like the best compilation of stories in human history, in my opinion. Okay, so the story I'm going to tell is a story called Abdullah the Fisherman and Abdullah the Merman. I love the name Abdullah. Okay, so the story goes that Abdullah the Fisherman has a large family, and for a few days he hasn't been able to catch fish. So he's starting to get nervous. He's starting to sweat. He's a little bit stressed. He has a lot of mouths to feed. So his wife encourages him, aka gives him a blessing, aka like gives him the juice, because we all know that his wife is fucking a magical goddess, like every single woman on earth. So after some encouragement, quote unquote, from his wife, he goes out and tries to fish again, but this time he gets lucky and he catches something. He pulls up his net, and what has he caught but a merman? And the merman's name is Abdullah. What? So they become fast friends. They're both named Abdullah. They both love and worship Allah, and they create a trading alliance. So every day, Abdullah the fisherman comes to the ocean and brings fruits to Abdullah of the sea. And Abdullah of the sea brings with him precious jewels and stones. Ooh. So naturally, Abdullah of land is now becoming very wealthy. However, at the same time, the sheikh's wife is having jewelry stolen. So the sheik notices this poor fisherman in town starting to pawn expensive jewels, and he's like, nah, fuck this. So he has him arrested on the fucking spot. But when the queen shows up and she inspects Abdullah's jewels, she immediately realizes that these are not her jewels. So the sheik releases Abdullah, and he feels really bad. So he decides to buy all of the jewels from Abdullah, and he offers his daughter, the princess, as a gift, basically, to be his wife. So naturally, Abdullah takes the opportunity. Now he has 2 wives. Now he's just growing more wealthy every day and is now very respected in town. But all throughout this time, he keeps his relationship with Abdullah the merman. So they meet every day. They keep trading. They're very good friends. I mean, how could they not be? 2 Abdullahs? I love this. So as time goes on, they start talking about going on a pilgrimage together to Mecca, which is so wholesome and so fucking cute. I just love this. But naturally, Abdullah the merman cannot make this journey as he lives in the ocean and can't pilgrimage across land. So Abdullah of land offers him the gift of bringing something on his behalf to Mecca, like bringing some kind of gift or offering. And Abdullah the merman is so moved by this that he invites Abdullah the fisherman to come visit his land underwater, or I guess that's kind of confusing, to visit his underwater city. So Abdullah the merman gives Abdullah the fisherman an ointment that allows him to breathe underwater. And he takes him into the ocean and brings him to his underwater sea world. They have a community, they have a city where these mer people live in a very innocent and beautiful way. They do not wear clothing. They do not have money. They eat only raw fish. Honestly, let's move. This sounds like my ideal place to live. But what Abdullah the fisherman found very bizarre was that when they had funerals, the mer people would celebrate. Like they would like have a really good time and vibe. Oh my God, that was a bomba. And so Abdullah the fisherman thought this was like kind of weird, you know, like everyone was like partying when people were dying. And so he explained to Abdullah the merman that he thought this was very odd because on land, people would mourn at funerals. And at this, the mer people were astonished. And they're like, what the fuck? They say, we cannot trust a person who does not rejoice that a loved one is returning a gift to Allah. And they're truly like disappointed and kind of disgusted with him, and they find him like untrustworthy, so they cast him out of their town. And so Abdullah the fisherman returns to land. He continues to live a prosperous life, but deep down he spends the rest of his days missing his dear friend Abdullah the merman and wondering about their underwater city and wishing that he could see his friend. Isn't that so cute? Oh my God, that's such a good story. Well, at that, we'll leave this as part 1, and we'll do another part. Part 2 will be next week. Thank you so much for listening. I want to bring up that I have a Patreon now. I will be doing extra content. I will be doing guided meditations. I also have merch. It would be really cool to get yourself a shirt. Also, just thank you. If you have stuff you want me to cover, if you have personal stories, things that you've witnessed, please email in at esotericaandnonsense@gmail.com. All of the information will be in the description of this episode. And I appreciate you so much. And I hope that you're taking really good care of you. Happy 2024. Over and out.